This week, we discuss how stopping distances compare between all-season and winter tires, no-haggle used car dealers, why replacement car keys are so expensive these days, and more. Next on Talking Cars. Hi, and welcome back. I'm Mike Quincy.
I'm Jake Fisher.
And I'm Jennifer Stockberger.
So, great news, Talking Cars fans. This is going to be an all questions episode, which we love doing. Let's get right into it. We get lots of emails, text questions, video questions. Keep them coming. TalkingCars@iCloud.com. That's TalkingCars@iCloud.com. So first up, it's Tim from Chicago. Where I live, we have on average 28 days with fresh snow a year. I like the idea of winter tires, but CR's ratings on most recommended winter tires show the dry braking only fair and wet braking is poor. Most all-season tires seem to perform better in these tests. Since we only experience snow for about half the days of winter season, am I giving up traction on more days that would benefit me? Tim, thanks for the question. Jen, what advice do you have?
So the first thing that Tim's question points out is that our ratings for tires are universal, meaning they're representing all tires across different types. So when Tim is seeing those fairs and poors for braking distances for winter tires, for example, that's true relative to some of maybe the higher performance tires that have very, very short braking distances. So that's the first thing. So it is reflecting the universe, not necessarily just winter tires. So with that said, Jake had actually a great idea. I reached out to Gene and Ryan to get some sense of what the magnitude of those differences were. So I asked Gene, and I have numbers comparing passenger all-season tires, the mom and pop T-rated, H-rated tires, to winter tires of that comparable. And we're looking at, just to give you a sense, dry and wet braking, it's about 30 feet more braking distances with a winter tire than it is with the all-season tires. The converse, snow traction, which is our test of accelerating from 5 to 20 miles per hour on packed snow, it takes about 20 more feet with an all-season tire to gain that traction than it does with the winter tire. And then ice braking is about 6 feet shorter with winter tires. But let me just qualify there. 6 feet doesn't sound from a lot. It's only from 10 miles per hour, just pointing out because it's done on an ice rink. So it becomes, those magnitudes are certainly enough to be thinking, is this what I want to do, as Tim is? But I would say it's less, Tim, about how many days of snow you get, but rather, more importantly, do you have to be out in it? If you are a person, and we've said this time, that has a job where you have to drive on snow-covered roads, you cannot beat the benefits of the dedicated winter tire in getting you there. Again, to his point, sacrificing some dry and wet braking, but being aware of it when the roads are cleared. And of course, as we always say, getting those winter tires off when spring comes and you're into the warmer and no risk for snow months. So hopefully that's helpful.
That's a really good point, Jen, especially considering how many of us are working at home these days. What kind of job might require you to get out there? And I mean, Jake Fisher has a driveway that makes the drive up Mount Everest seem tame. So you're obviously, Jake, a big fan of winter and snow tires.
Yeah, well, I have been. I've always had winter tires for my cars, going back years and years. I know back when I lived in Michigan, I would drive my Toyota MR2 with snow tires, and I would be able to get around when other cars wouldn't. But Tim's got a great point, and the one thing I just want to kind of throw in here is that with a lot of us now working at home. And a lot of us really, I think a lot of workplaces, depending on what you do, are more acceptable of working at home occasionally. Going forward, it does change the calculus about this. So for instance, I have always had, for my wife's Prius, we have always had winter tires. But right now, she's been working at home, and even in the future, she'll probably be working at home a lot more. So when you start really thinking about the future here, I'm trying to think, will my wife ever drive in the snow again? The kids are going to go on buses. But if it's bad weather out, because she's so used to working at home and now has the technology to work at home, there may be a lot less cars out on the road. And if you're one of those people who has this opportunity to, and even the schools, I suspect when the snow flies, they're just going to flip the switch and they know how to do remote learning now. Is it that important? So I think you got to take all that into account of whether or not you're going to be using them or not.
Great question, Tim. It's going to take us to our next, which is from Susan. And Susan writes, why is it so expensive for replacement car keys? I needed replacements for my Lincoln MKX, and the dealer told me it would cost $400! Exclamation point. I asked why and was told the cost was because they had to be programmed by a computer. Is that normal cost these days? So great question, Susan. It's not an easy or inexpensive fix if you lose your car keys these days. So key fobs can cost actually anywhere between $50 to $400. So that number that you were quoted is kind of sort of in the ballpark. And if your car was built in the last 5 years or so, you're kind of stuck. You're kind of stuck having to go back to the dealer for replacement and pay these high prices. The programming equipment that they use the dealers is expensive, and that's kind of where it hits you. Now, the good news is if your car is more than 5 years old, Consumer Reports advice is to call up a locksmith. You might be able to save a lot of money by getting an aftermarket key fob, but keep in mind that some manufacturers, and we did a big story about this, Mike Monticello, who's a regular contributor to Talking Cars, did a great story. And we found out that Audi and Subaru, for example, told us that some aftermarket fobs won't work. So it's kind of there's some good consumer advice here, but it's not a slam dunk in that you can always get by with a cheaper fix. And I mean, Jake, we were talking about this question before, and you definitely had some feelings about this.
Well, I mean, look, the question is, why is it so expensive? And the truth is, yes, it is expensive. But why is it? And the truth is, it's about profitability. When it comes to aftermarket products, and I should say aftermarket, I should say replacement parts. They're profit centers for automobile companies. They absolutely are. So like if you need to replace the wheel on your car, a new alloy wheel, it may cost $500 at the dealership. Do you really think it costs $500 to put it on the car for the car company? I mean, this might be a $60 wheel that they're now charging $500 for it. So the markup is incredible. And, just to put that in perspective, $400 for a key fob. I mean, you could buy a really nice Chromebook for $400, right? I mean, we understand what technology you could buy for $400, and you think about all the technology that goes into that, it's way more. So, it's overpriced. It's unfortunate, but, if there's a way you could do something on the aftermarket or go to a locksmith, go for it. But yeah, it is overpriced. I feel you.
I mean, Jen, as we've often talked about with automotive technology, making things better and easier, there's sometimes there is a downside to it, isn't it?
Yeah, and often it is cost. Even, the cost of safety, we talk about that, the advantages, but the replacement cost of some new safety features. So yes, that often is the downside. I do think we certainly support the ones where the benefits outweigh that. So I would say, yeah, in this case, the convenience of the fob for many people does outweigh the cost.
Anyway, check out Mike Monticello's story on consumerreports.org for more information on key fobs.
For those that don't know, CR is a nonprofit, and we're able to do all of the work we do, including anonymously buying our test cars and producing this show through memberships to our website and magazine, as well as through donations. What the Talking Cars donation program will do is allow loyal Talking Cars fans to show support for the podcast, assist in supporting the costs of producing the podcast, as well as support all the work CR does to keep consumers safe. You'll be able to contribute either as a one-time donation or on a monthly basis. Even $5 a month really helps. Go to cr.org, cr.org/givetalkingcars to find out more. In any event, we'll keep delivering talking cars each and every week. Again, go to cr.org/givetalkingcars to find out more.
Next up, as we've heard from Luke from Collegeville, Pennsylvania. What is your opinion on used car dealers that don't negotiate, like CarSense, CarMax, etc.? My grandparents are obsessed with them, saying they don't negotiate because they are priced right. Thoughts? So, Jake, you definitely had some opinions about this matter in our meeting, so take it away.
Well, it depends on who you are. If you're someone who likes to negotiate and you think you can get the best price, then go for it. But if you're like a lot of people, and myself included, if you don't want to haggle, you just want to get a fair price, I think it's a great option. It's a terrific option because the truth is that, if you are this master haggler or negotiator and you could go and get the best price, that dealership is going to turn around and just kind of really inflate the price for someone else. It all comes out in the wash. So, I think it's a great way. It's interesting. Saturn, we were talking about before. I mean, years ago, they actually had, just like, this is your price. There's no negotiation. Actually, some other car companies do this too. I mean, if you go to and buy a Tesla, for instance, right now, there isn't a negotiation there. It's like, this is the price. And generally, people really like that. Nobody likes to go to the car dealership. Nobody likes to go and buy cars. And part of the reason is this. They're trying to nickel and dime you for all these things. So it is a good option. I mean, in our car buying service, if you go to Consumer Reports and you purchase a car through us, we've actually switched. There was a time that we said, here's what the dealership is paying for it, and negotiate from there. But now we go to a pre-negotiated price and say, okay, this is a good deal, pay this. And from the people who have used that service, that they like that more. And I understand that.
Mm-hmm. Jenna, are you a real negotiator? Are you a real haggler?
So no, I am not. So I joke, one of the things we do at home is we like to go to flea markets and antiques. I mean, you can probably see I've got some old stuff back here. And that there's very few areas where you still do that haggling and negotiation. Antiques are one of them, but we're usually talking about $50 to $100 versus maybe hundreds or thousands of dollars for a car. I do not like it. Some people, though, I agree. Most people don't like it, which is why people like CarMax and CarSense are doing, a decent business. But there are some people that it's a sport. They absolutely, and you may be one of them, Mike Quincy, that enjoy that challenge.
I'm kind of with you. I don't like the haggling, but you just described my father.
Yeah, he enjoys it. Right. Exactly. And some of the people we work with, they absolutely enjoy. So take the tips, do your research. Don't do the monthly payment. Don't spout that out. Try and get your best offer. But I will say too, Jake talked about the populations that will end up paying more. Sometimes women are one of those populations where they feel, she's not going to know much. So what they lost on your father, they're going to gain back on someone like me. And that does happen. Do you want to go home and talk to your husband about this? Type of thing. So if you feel like that's the process, and we've always said, walk out of a dealership, ask for a different salesperson. If you're not liking the transaction, all of those tools. But yes, I am not a haggler.
All right. I think we could almost spend an entire episode talking about negotiation. So we do need to move on. So here's one from Jay from New Jersey. I have a 2017 VW GTI and a 2019 Mazda CX-9. Both manufacturers state in their manuals that premium fuel will boost horsepower, but both cars are recommended for regular fuel. Are there any other reasons I might want to use regular besides the cost savings? I've used premium in my GTI for a while and find it runs much smoother when I use premium. So listen, Jake, we've got premium versus regular. Let's get ready to rumble. Tell us what should people be putting in their cars?
Well, it depends on your car, but I mean, for this person who it's not requiring premium, and most cars don't require premium, use regular. If you see a benefit In these cases, you could get a little more horsepower, and even an older car that doesn't require premium, it might be smoother. You could prevent detonation is the technical term. But the point is that it could actually help it. But if there's no benefit that you're seeing from the premium, use regular. If you use regular, are you harming anything? If you use premium and you have no benefit, are you harming anything? Well, let's be clear. You're not going to hurt your regular car by using premium. You're not going to hurt it. But you're just wasting your money if you're not seeing any benefit. I think it really just comes down to that.
Right. But Jen, we know that some manufacturers make it clear. They say premium is required.
Right. And then that's how we test. When it's required, we use it. I mean, required is required. And obviously the engine's tuned for that level of octane. But I almost say, how much horsepower do you need on regular roads? Some of these small, 4-cylinder turbocharged, there's a lot of horsepower there. So again, to Jake's point, if you're not seeing a substantial benefit with the premium, just go with the regular.
Yeah, and as we often say with questions about how do I operate my car, check out your owner's manual. Always read that. And we've always also said when you open up your fuel filler lid, often there is a label inside that says just what octane is required, and sometimes it says premium fuel required. And if that's the case, I would put in premium. But I'm with you guys with this. If it doesn't require it, I wouldn't put it in. Next up is Xenia from Portland, Oregon. Do you know why push for park on electronic shifters is a thing now? There are shifters that use all buttons, rotary knobs, traditional PRNDL, or as we say, Prindle, which of course stands for park, reverse, neutral, drive, and low. But shifters in cars from BMW, Volvo, Genesis, etc. always put the park button in a weird, unintuitive spot away from reverse, neutral, and drive buttons. Why? Isn't it potentially dangerous as people new to this design will think the car is in park when it isn't? Is there a benefit to having a button for park at all? Now, Jake, we've looked at this upside down, sideways, and backwards, and especially when it comes to scoring our cars. So what advice do you have for Xenia?
Well, it's not even advice. We agree. We agree. I mean, this is a problematic trend, and we've been seeing for about 20 years. It started with BMW that kind of we say broke the Prindle, and they just basically, I think they actually lobbied the government to try to get rules so they didn't have to do it in a certain way, and it's been just like scattershot. We've just seen all these random different ways of doing it. Now the question is, why do they do it? Now, we completely agree there's issues with it. In fact, we actually remove points for some of these shifters in both in the usability of them, as well as we found issues with people actually not getting the thing into park, getting out of the car, and the car's rolling away, which causes a danger. And if they don't automatically have a rollaway prevention, we're taking additional points off in our scoring. So it is a big issue. Why do they do it? And we've been kind of scratching our heads about why do you mess these things up? I mean, you have something that works. I'm all for developing things and making them better, but it didn't really seem initially that they've made them better. I will say some are better for a couple of reasons. Some are better for one, you sometimes have a lot more room in your cockpit. So if you look at Honda systems, for instance, they're very flat. You've usually got more room to put cup holders and cubbies and bins, whereas sometimes like that shifter is kind of like, you crush your cup or something like that. So there's some conveniences to that. The other issue, which many of these now actually because of our scoring have changed, is they will automatically actuate. So for instance, if you forget to put the car into park, or you open up the door, and you were still in drive or in neutral, they'll automatically go to park. And that's harder to do when you have like a physical shifter. So that is a kind of an advantage. However, with a physical shifter, you could do that too. You could put the emergency brake on. So there's things like that. So there's kind of a somewhat weak reason that they're actually adding them. I suspect part of it is they seem neat. They seem futuristic. I think that's unfortunate. But we'll see. I mean, some of them aren't as bad as others, and we're continuing to look at them and continue to rate them.
Mm-hmm. And Jen Stockberger, you're one of our many safety gurus here at Consumer Reports. Why do you think the manufacturers are doing this?
Yeah, I think Jake has already touched on too. Real estate. Those electronic versions can take up far less room than a traditional Prindle. And differentiation. We did something a little different. We'll even see it on the same model between different trim lines or different type, that they will go have a regular shifter on the lower trim, for example, and the push button on a higher trim. It seems to be like a sense of higher end to have a fancier or a different shifter. And to Xenia's point, we are all living with the transition. So we are very used to a traditional shifter. So it's changing. And is that a higher learning curve for those of us who are used to driving with the Prindle? Probably.
Over the weekend, I drove our tested Ram 1500 pickup truck, which has a rotary knob. And then I took it back to the track and switched over to our Sonata Hybrid, which has the push buttons. And one of the things that we do here at Consumer Reports is we're testing all the new technology, all the new cars, and we're going to have more and more experience with these gear selectors as time goes on. But great question. I especially love the emphasis of why? Okay. Next up is a question from Jean Noel. My Honda CR-V is a touring model with all the safety features standard. However, the model you tested isn't as well equipped. Would any model rate higher because all the safety features are standard and you award points for safety? Okay, back to safety and back to Jen Stockberger.
So the short answer, Jean-Noel, is yes. But so when we award points for the safety features that have been proven effective, forward collision warning, automatic emergency braking, blind spot warning, pedestrian detection, we are doing that at what we're calling the model level. So in your case, all Honda CR-Vs are getting those points, regardless of the trim. EX, EXL, Touring, as you mentioned. So the key there is that feature has to be standard equipment across all of those trim lines. But every CR-V will get that, whether our test car has that or not.
Jake, you have a brief story about a certain Hyundai Elantra SE, which kind of changed the way we looked at this also.
Yeah, well, I mean, at one point we were kind of looking at it slightly different, and we had tested a Hyundai Elantra SE. This was years ago, and at the time, that was the only way you could get stability control. This was when they were kind of optional, and they played the same games of the safety equipment at that time. I'm not just talking about Hyundai. I mean, all the automakers. So yes, the Hyundai Elantra SE wound up as a top pick. And I'm pretty convinced that many people purchased Hyundai Elantra non-SEs and wound up buying that based on our top pick status. And we know that because when we have our surveys, we see all these people and we knew the trims and they're like, yeah, they didn't get the stability control. And we really took that to heart. And so while Honda has made the touring model, had that standard safety equipment, why do you have to get the touring? Why do automakers make you get the leather interior and the big sunroof in order to get the safety equipment? Because the safety equipment, for a lot of people, that's what they want. They don't need the, we've looked at this before. I mean, sometimes like Mercedes-Benz models, you have to get rear heated and cooled cup holders in order to get pedestrian detections. I mean, they'll link it that way is just asinine. If you want the safety, you should be able to get that. Safety shouldn't come at the additional cost, especially when you're already spending 25, 30, even more thousands of dollars for this car.
Right. So, general advice, get the most safety that you can, which brings us to our final question. We're going to wrap this up with a question from John from Fairfax, Virginia. My wife and I have a 2015 Honda Pilot and a 2008 Acura TL. Our oldest has a learner's permit, and we've been letting him practice his driving skills on both cars so he gets familiar with different vehicle sizes, handling, etc. He's doing a great job and seems to prefer the Acura. We've got others that will be driving soon and are thinking of letting the TL become the kid car, which means I'll need a new daily driver. I may be a middle-aged suburban dad, but I'd still like a little flair when I drive. Another exclamation point. Right now, I'm thinking about the Mazda 6, but wanted to know if you had any suggestions. All right, so we're in the quick answer section of this podcast. Suburban cool dad, Jen, what do you think that John should drive?
Right. So it struck me too as we were looking that Mike Quincy, myself, and Jake Fisher all have 16-year-olds. So we're hearing you, John. We're all in it with you right now, deciding what's the safest vehicles for these kids. So one, the TL is a good choice for them. You know, Jake mentioned stability control. That 2008 TL actually had standard stability control way ahead of when it was mandated. So good choice there. The Mazda 6, it absolutely stands out among midsize sedans for, and I quote Consumer Reports, its driving exuberance. It sets itself apart in terms of what you're saying, a little more flair, a little more agility. So good choice there. Among that group. What I did say is if you wanted to stretch the pocketbook a little bit, and maybe John, after raising some teenagers, you deserve it, that maybe an Audi A4, even used 2017 or later, Audi A4, so not really old, would be kind of a gift to yourself. Certainly steps it up in terms of agility. Still a rear seat that some grown children can get into. So that was my only thought. But if you're sticking with that midsize sedan, the Mazda 6 is a great choice.
Jake?
I'm going to go the other way. And I'm going to say, if you've got your kids are growing up, maybe you don't need that much room. And if you go one size smaller, those vehicles over the last several years have gotten a lot bigger. So if you look at things like Volkswagen GTI or a Honda Civic Sport or even a Mazda 3, these vehicles are pretty substantial, roomy, comfortable vehicles that are really sporty. You could get them with stick shifts and become really sports cars. And when you go one size smaller, check all the boxes, get the leather, get all the options you want, the sunroof, everything. And they kind of feel more substantial and they're comfortable and, probably will suit you pretty well.
Excellent. I actually like both your choices. However, I'm going to switch it up a little bit. I'm going with the Camry XSE. Now, a lot of people think Camry, they think boring, but trim line in this case really matters. The XSE has a stiffer suspension. It has sportier tires, a great fuel economy. I'd go with the front wheel drive model. I would go with the 4-cylinder. And you can't beat Camry's reliability, a great reliability history. Long list of standard safety features. Don't laugh. The Camry, especially in the XSE model, it's a driver's car. It really has meaty steering. It has good handling. Don't kid yourself. It's really, really good. So that kind of gives John a few vehicles to choose from. And unfortunately, that brings us to the end of this episode. Always check the show notes for more information on the vehicles and topics that we discussed. These all question episodes are super fun. We love doing them. So keep the questions coming. talkingcars@icloud.com. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.